Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And back for his weekly visit is Frank from Rockets Chop Shop. And Frank, the Rockets look like they might be turning a corner 3 weeks ago when they won 6 out of 10 with a 7-game homestand approaching. I was all excited, but since then they've dropped 9 out of 10. And Eric Gordon says he sees no improvement from last year. None. Do you see improvement?
I can't speak for EG because obviously he has a unique perspective. He's a player, so his word is more valid than any of ours could be as far as whether he sees improvement because he's actually in it. But from the outside looking in, I have to say, I have seen improvement in certain aspects of the team. Obviously, one of the main things is their rebounding, which was something that I really was really disappointed in last year. Rebounding to me, it's a hustle stat. And, for a team with all these young guys, that was really it was terrible for us last year. The improvement they've made in that aspect of the game is really kind of remarkable over the course of an offseason. Other than that, defensively slightly better. Some of their games, they're not the worst defense in the NBA anymore. I think they're like third worst now. So that's a little improvement over there. One thing that has been kind of really surprising for me, especially given Silas's, the claim of him being like this offensive guru, is that their offense is really taking a hit this season, and really across the board. And so I guess the way I look at it on the macro level, they've made really marginal improvements in certain areas. Individually, I think individual players have made some improvement to their game over from last year to this year. Now, you could attribute that to just random growth and guys just being older and more experienced, or maybe it's something intentional the coaching staff did. But I can't say there has been zero improvement. But yeah, there is not a lot if you look at it from a big picture standpoint.
Yeah, you and I have assumed that the Rockets and maybe Silas are trying to tank. I think a lot of fans think that. I hear guys on Spaces say this is, Silas can't be this dumb. He may be trying to do stuff based on coaching rotations, playing time, etc. But man, John Granato with ESPN 97.5 has said more than once on his show recently that he knows for a fact the Rockets are not tanking right now. He says they want to win. Granato stays in communication with Tillman Fertitta. He's mentioned it a number of times on the show, Frank. And I'll also point out he's predicted a couple of major Texan stories in the last couple of years based on his inside info. So I sort of have to take him at his word. And maybe that's more concerning than the fact that they were trying to tank.
Yeah, I didn't believe they were trying to tank since last year. I don't know when, I can't even think, if we really want to go way back, the wow factor is all you need to know about this team. Despite the fact that, basically I think they conceded that we were going to lose our pick to OKC in 2021, and they try to win. And just by dumb luck and just sheer incompetence, we were able to be so bad at trying to be good that we ended up getting the pick regardless. So there's nothing that indicates to me that they've been trying to tank. You see the lineups that they've been throwing out there. Whenever there's veterans available, Coach Silas plays them, and he just does things that looks like he's trying to win. And I don't know how anybody could be faking some of those post-game conferences that he has. He literally looks sick sometimes after the game. You could see the distraught and all the stuff on his face. So I don't think he's putting himself through that on purpose. That looks like a guy that's trying to do something and is not being successful at it. So, yeah, as far as the reports of his time running short in Houston, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened in the offseason. If it happened mid-season like they predicted, then I'd really be surprised because I'm not sure what people expect from this roster with the way it's poorly built. For example, we just had Daishen Nix be the backup point guard, and all of a sudden he falls off the face of the earth in his DNP. So those types of questions about roster construction, I think if Silas is going to get some blame, Stone should also get some blame, because if they are trying to compete, and this is Rafael Stone's idea a competitive roster, then we have bigger questions in our coach.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. The veterans playing to me is a bigger sign than anything. And I get it. Eric Gordon, maybe you got a deal done behind the scenes with him, but there's just times in the game and things that he's doing, and I'm like, yeah, this seems like a guy maybe trying. He thinks he's making the moves to win the game, but just want to remind everybody real quickly to subscribe and comment on YouTube. And by the way, I want to avoid the front office and coaching for just a second. Maybe this is not going to avoid it, but I want to simplify exactly why the Rockets do not win, Frank, and what directly leads to winning. We don't say this enough, but in the NBA, the team with the best player on the floor usually wins the game. They definitely win the series. When you talk about the playoffs, that almost is 100% the case. The Rockets' best player, whoever you think it is, I'm just going to say it, he's not good enough. The NBA is loaded. Whether you think it's Jabari or Jalen or Sengun or whoever you think is or Kevin Porter, it doesn't matter. How many teams, Frank, is our best player better than the other teams? And the Pistons with an injured Cade Cunningham is what comes to mind. But who else?
Well, I mean, even if Bojan or whichever one he is, if he's healthy, he's better than everybody on our team. He's a real NBA player, so he's a vet. If we're talking about potential, then yeah, we got guys with a lot of potential. But right now in the NBA, he's a better player, and he's really good, honestly. You go to I'm going to start just looking at the bottom tier teams. Orlando, Paolo is probably better than everybody on this roster. You go to San Antonio, you got Keldon Johnson and Vassell. Those are guys, I'm not sure. That's debatable. OKC, SGA is better than everybody on this roster. And then you start getting into the top tier teams, which those are self-explanatory. And, my one thing that I started thinking of is, like, people assume that this like linear progression into the playoffs next year. And I'm thinking, like, in order to get into the playoffs, that means you got to knock off one of those teams that are playoff contenders. In order to do that, like, to your point, you got to have the players that are better than theirs, coaches that are better than theirs, and a front office that's better than theirs, to say that you are just that much superior, that you are going to be better than them and take their spot. Because it's not like there's, the Rockets are ready to be in the playoffs, let's add a 11th roster to it. You're going to have to beat somebody out of it. You're going to have better players than other teams. And, just thinking across the league, even some of the bottom tiers, Charlotte, LaMelo is probably better than everybody on this roster. The Pacers, Halliburton is probably better than everybody on this roster. They have vets over there as well. I mean, I don't know. I can't really think. Maybe I'm missing a bad team. I'm really trying to go through it in my head right now. I can't think of a team that we have our best guy, and I think right now it's probably KPJ, that he's better than just another player on a team. I can't think of a certain team. What about you? I'm curious to see if you've thought about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the San Antonio guys that you mentioned, it's a little bit debatable with the Rockets. And, I'm going to get to the guy that I think is the best player on the roster. And you and I have said this before, and I think who I think is the best guy on this roster. I don't think it's Kevin Porter, although he's moving up the way he's playing right now. But I want to get to one of the other things that leads to winning, and it's 3-point percentage. And the Rockets are 28th in the NBA in 3-point percentage, but they take the 10th most attempts of any team in the NBA. Their 3-point shooting has to improve, and that comes down to three players who lead the Rockets in 3-point attempts: Jalen, Jabari, and KPJ. They take about 19 per game and all shoot under 34%. So, 34% or under, basically. So nothing changes, Frank, until you start shooting the ball better. And we see it over and over again in the NBA. The team that hits more 3-pointers typically wins the game.
Yep. Their 3-pointers have been just really bad this year. And I think that may be the reason why Silas is on the hot seat. Because if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing as your superpower, then what is, because he's not a defensive coach. He's not a guy that's going to like be the thug it out, toughness type of guy. His thing, he's an offensive kind of minded coach. And the players offensively, I mean, you saw the game without Sengun. They look like they could not do anything for them. And the fact that Sengun is probably the most pivotal player in impacting their 3-point shooting, and they still play him on low minutes is just craziness to me. But I'm looking at, from last year to this year, their shooting has gone down pretty much across the board. The EFG is down 2%. Turnovers are up for the team. They're not generating a lot of corner threes, which is what you would expect from a spread pick and roll team. I'm looking on Cleaning the Glass right now from the trends from when we had James Harden in the past, 5 years he was here. The Rockets were always in the kind of the 12, 13% on corner threes as far as the percentage of their shots. In the past 2 years, we're 6 and 7%. And that's not going to cut it in this style of offense. Literally, one of the key things in this offense is to generate those corner threes. Because when the lob isn't there, the help is going to come from that big man from those corners. And as you know, we don't have a point guard that's able to make those reads. So it's not, it is a question to ask. And I think, I think you were on the space I was on yesterday, and people were asking me about, do I blame Silas or the offense for this with the players that we have? It's a mixture of both. It's like he's banging his head on doing what he has to do, seeing clearly the players he has do not fit this playing style. You want to talk about three-point shooting. They're not generating corner threes. They're not shooting well. They're not, when they do run pick and rolls, we're one of the worst pick and roll teams, yet we're still top 5 in frequency. It's just a mismatch across the board. And it's I am getting a little concerned about the Rockets, just the outlook, because time is not on our side. As every day passes, we get closer to the offseason. We get closer to the trade deadline. We get closer to the draft. We get closer to a season where we're supposed to be competitive. And it's just, things are just kind of at a standstill right now.
Yeah, you said it. The type of threes they generate are not the best threes. And I just looked this up in the last couple of days. Most of the Rockets fan base knows that KPJ way better on catch and shoot three-pointers, way better than self-created ones. But Frank, a couple of days ago, when I looked at Jalen's 2 worst shots, he had 73 step back jumpers with a 30% success rate and 132 pull-up jumpers at 31%. These were like the shots that he's taken a ton. He had 137 pull-ups all of last season. So he's pretty much equaled that already this year. He's nearly shooting 40% last year, where this year it was only 31%. So it tells me that, there's a lot of things going on with that. And you could talk about what he's generating, but I say most of Jalen's shots are actually, when they're jumpers, they're open. It's just a matter of him knocking them down.
Yeah, he's he profiles as a movement shooter that comes off screens. I think the Rockets are rightfully trying to explore his isolation scoring, but my thing is they should have done this last year. Once again, back to that thing about the timeline. This is why a lot of us were saying, why were you doing all this stuff with Tate and Wood and all this crap last year? Why were you not prioritizing Jalen Green as a ball handler last year in his rookie season? Because the more you explore Christian Wood's offensive game and whether he's a fit here, the less time you have to figure out about some of these young guys if you drafted so high. They're doing the same thing with Jabari Smith Jr. right now. For whatever reason, this ties in back into what you were talking about. They're not trying to tank. If they were trying to tank, Jalen Green last year would have been, all these stats you named, we would have been talking about this last season. And maybe he would have improved by now over the offseason, and knowing that this is an area he has weakness in. We're going to see the same thing with Jabari. He's going to have these stretches where he looks like the worst player in the NBA offensively. And thank God for him that he has a motor defensively, or he would get that label. I think his defense does help him. People look at him and say, okay, that guy's not lazy. He's just having a slump. But if he was lazy on defense, if you look at some of the numbers he had in certain stretches, he looks really, really bad. And, once again, the creativity to get him involved in the offense. He's not a guard, so he can't isolate like Jalen and KPJ. So he's just a kind of like a secondary thing that they use supplementally to generate, for the guards to whether they want to decide to pick and pop with. I think Jalen is being miscast right now. I like the ball handling that I'm seeing from him. I like the playmaking that he's flashed this year. I'm not happy with the defense. I think it regressed some. I'm not happy with some of the body language stuff. I think that's also regressed some from the kid that we saw last year. But I think that he's being miscast as what they're trying to make him do, and that is definitely a product of the offense that he's in. He shouldn't be taking step back threes. That's not his game. That guy should be working off of screens, using his speed and athleticism as a weapon, and running around, making defenders have to chase him. He's one of the fastest dudes in the league, and that's you know to me a good comp offensively. He's closer to like Steph, not shooting wise, but his shot archetype should be like that. But I would say a good comp for him is going to be Jordan Poole, which is a healthy mixture of isolation. But Jordan Poole is a movement shooter where he comes off a lot of curls and different types of screens in the Warriors offense. When he does isolate, he does really, really bad. So, I just think that's another thing that's on the coaching and the front office.
All right. I've kind of been nice so far. Now I'm not going to be so nice. The Rockets can't win until, and you just talked a little bit about this, until Jalen Green and Kevin Porter stop being the laziest backcourt in the NBA. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. Not sure how many times I see them flat footed in transition defense, or when there's a rebound to be had, or for a loose ball. If the clock is moving, you got a job. Just straight up laziness, Frank, or a refusal to get dirty is just not acceptable.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm a little worried about Jalen, because one thing that I always banked on him is his work ethic. And I assume that I'm hoping still, I haven't given up yet, that he's cut from a different cloth. Like we've heard that he has a very like aggressive work ethic. And when it comes to basketball, I would hate for him to be a guy that only is good when he's scoring, because to me, then he's just a role player. And he has to be dynamic. You have to be able to get up for defense. All the great guards, two guards, especially in the NBA, if he's not going to be a James Harden, where he's generating like 100% of a team's offense and is just a savant, which he isn't, he needs to be a two-way player and be able to impact the game all around. And, it's hard to tell because his vet is KJ Martin. His vet is KJ Martin. The roster, once again, let's fall back on that, is so poorly built. Not to consider you have 7 first-round picks on this roster, and you have veterans like Jayshawn Tate, who was playing in the rookie sophomore game last year, or maybe the year before. KJ Martin, who was just in high school 2 years ago, it feels like. And guys like Boban, who, he's a great, friendly guy. But what is Boban going to tell Jalen Green about doing what's right on his drives or not taking dumb shots?
Well, his vet is still Eric Gordon, because Eric Gordon is still on the team miraculously, and that guy doesn't care about playing hard either.
The vet has probably thrown his hand. I'm sure Matt might have tried to talk to them, but Eric is not that type of guy. He's not going to be in people's faces. He's not confrontational. He's not the Udonis Haslem type or the Pat Bev type that's going to get on you in real time when you mess up and you cuss you out. They need that. These dudes are young men. They need structure. Anybody that says otherwise has never really been around young men, young athletes. You can't just give them a buffet and tell them go do what you want. That's a recipe for disaster. And, if you're not going to get it from Coach Silas, then they could have supplemented with the roster and having a lot of veteran presence of real veterans that are, the aggressive type, to kind of keep them in line. But I think there's been a failure across the board. And honestly, reality is going to set in for a lot of the fan base that, lives in this pie in the sky view of rebuilds. You've said it. I've said it. Mike on Spaces has said it. If you watch enough rebuilds, you know how these go. You can't mess up on the little things. The teams that are successful hit on every single thing. This is the hardest thing a franchise does in the NBA, is go from being the bottom to getting back to the top. This is the hardest part of building a team, is starting from the bottom, and having little gaffes here and there. They add up, and ultimately, it's looking like this is going to be extended a little bit longer than people think.
When Ryan Hollins has to say on the broadcast, like he did in the Mavericks game, they should take a timeout here. There needs to be some accountability when the team is not doing what it's supposed to do, getting back on a fast break. And, I know who the culprit was on that fast break. and his name starts with Jalen. And so when that's not happening, that's part of the big issue with Jalen Green is the accountability. And I try to get away from the coaching for most of this, but I'm going to start getting back into it, Frank. And let me talk about the Rockets. I think their best player is a guy named Sengun. 26 minutes per game is how much Sengun plays. If he was an average normal starter, he would have 19 points and 11 rebounds per game. And that's why I think he's the best player. His true shooting has gone from 55% to near 61% this year. Is Sengun's minutes about foul trouble? No. Has it been an issue? Yeah, a couple of times it's been an issue, but no more than Jabari, who's averaging more minutes a game than Sengun. How many minutes in the last month? I mean, how many times has Sengun's coach iced his own player because he's got a 3-man rotation going at center? And Alp is sitting on the bench, Frank, for 20 to 25 minutes in real time. This is an issue.
Yeah, that's been the strangest thing of all of this is like you can look at all the numbers you just said. I mean, there's more numbers. I've done videos on their clutch minutes. He's the best defender in the clutch for them. When he's not on the floor in those clutch minutes, their offense literally falls off the face of the map. And these are closing minutes of a game, and substantial amounts of minutes, because we're always, one of the improvements they've made, they don't get blown out as much as they did last year. So they have been in a lot of close games this year. And when he's in, we're a good team. We're a good team. The percentages are all through the roof. I also did a video to shows in 4 of the games where he was able to be featured as a hub, where they allowed him to get a lot of front court touches on the team, more than basically the average between Jokic and Sabonis, which is around just over 40 front court touches, which is a lot for a big man. The offense is like 118 points per possession. Assist percentage would be second in the league in those games if that was the case. The true shooting is, I think, like up in the high 50s. Jalen is averaging 20-something, like 26.5 points. He's shooting 50% from the field in those games and shooting 37% from 3 in those games. The only person that struggles in those games is Kevin Porter Jr. So it comes down, honestly, I think it's a prioritization of KPJ and his development, because if you look at the numbers currently in aggregate, him and Sengun they haven't been mixing. Recently they have, and I think that lends to some of the success that he's having, because a lot of that success was stuff that Jalen was having when he plays his 2-man game. So let me clarify this for the audience. When Sengun and Jalen play a lot of minutes together, Jalen plays better. When Sengun plays a lot of minutes, Jalen plays better. When Sengun doesn't, Jalen suffers. Now that Sengun and KPJ are running a lot of actions together, you see KPJ's is actually becoming more efficient. So I don't know, man. You tell me. That doesn't math up to me. So that just tells me that the Rockets have a clear priority. It's not Jalen Green. It's not Alperen Sengun. It's Kevin Porter Jr. And a lot of fans, it just seems that way. You could look at it, everything they've done, from the John Wall thing to having Jalen as a secondary player last year, the guy you drafted number 2, to what we're seeing this year with trying to bench Sengun at the start of the season, coming in for Bruno, the quote-unquote lob threat, to give an easier read for Kevin Porter Jr. Everything they've done is for him, and I guess it means that they think he's going to be the franchise player.
I'm going to go back to the minutes deal with Sengun, because let's just say he legitimately has foul trouble in the third quarter, Silas will sit him, Frank, for 12 game minutes. So the Rockets are now halfway through the fourth quarter and the score is out of hand. So by the time you bring Sengun back in, the game's over. So basically he gets in foul trouble in the third quarter, but never comes back in the game until it's garbage time.
Yeah, he does that with a lot of players. I mean, there's times he'll sit Jalen for like a whole quarter, or the fourth quarter, he'll wait till like 3 or 4 minutes to bring some of the guys in. I mean, what can you do in 3 or 4 minutes when the game is pretty much on the way? The other team that's better than you, their starters have been in since like 7 minutes and killing your bench. Now, all of a sudden, you're supposed to come off the bench with 4 minutes left to save the game. So it's a lot of just random stuff like that. Bruno Fernando, also, I don't know what happened to him. He's just fallen off the face of the earth. He played much better last year. I'm not sure what's going on, if he's injured or something. Garuba is a great hustle and defender, great rebounder. Offense isn't there. There was a couple possessions where teams, I think it was Dallas, where they literally just ignored him. Like they looked at him and just like, no, we're not. We're just going to box out. You can go ahead and shoot. So, yeah, it's strange. The minutes thing, the fouls. I mean, he had 5 fouls when they beat Philly in that double overtime game, coming into the game with 2 minutes left, and he stayed in the game the rest of the game into the first overtime and then foul out to the second overtime. And honestly, if they really cared, playing with fouls is a development time. That's a thing you could teach a player. Like they need to learn to do that. You don't bench. If James Harden was on a team and he had 5 fouls and it's a game you want to win, you're not going to bench him just because he might foul out. You might sit him down earlier and during the game, but when it's crunch time, you let your guys go and you trust them. And if they foul out, it's a learning experience for the young guys. But once again, they're not tanking. A lot of this big brain stuff is, I think, a lot of Silas trying to force his philosophies. And ultimately, if you back it up even further, then you look at the roster he has, it's poorly built. And, that's on the front office as well.
There's some things about a few players that I need to get cleared up. And because what Silas is doing, I'm not really sure about him. But you mentioned Garuba, and we talk about him because what he does affects Sengun as far as minutes and everything goes. And I'm just wondering, do you think it gets to the point where he is a playoff rotation player? And I ask it because I'm not seeing it. And offensively, no outside shot. He doesn't have an offensive game basically at all. Hitting an occasional flat-footed jumper when nobody's within 15 feet is nowhere close to enough. And he's not a good finisher around the rim. He misses even layups. His passing and his defense basically has to be Draymond Green elite to make up for all that. His passing, I think it's overrated by Rockets fans. His defense is good, but it's not good enough to make up for what he's not giving you, Frank.
Yeah, it's still early. I'm looking now. His offensive rating is 101. That's pretty bad. He's literally the worst offensive player on the team. Playoffs, I don't know. If he develops a jumper over the next half decade or something, maybe. But like you said, in order to make up that gap, he really has to be dynamic in other parts of his game. And nothing except maybe the rebounding right now is elite. And we've seen it even with players that are better than him, like Clint Capella. The Warriors made Clint Capella unplayable in a lot of those games. And he's a great rim. So we should know as Rockets fans that some of these flaws that people have, when you get to the playoffs, every round you go up, it's magnified times 1,000.
And Capella could at least finish around the rim.
He was a lob threat, and they took that away, and he was useless. And they basically, Mike D'Antoni stubbornly let him play out, and to the point where Steph went for 30 because he was trying to keep Capella on the court in the half. But it's I can't think of any of these guys in the playoffs, honestly. Like, we're so bad. To me, the only way that they could keep that pick next year or even be a decent team, they have to overhaul the entire roster and keep just a couple of spare parts around, a couple of the core guys. But I'm talking about cleaning house. Like, probably 6 or 7 guys wouldn't be on this roster if you want to make the playoffs next year.
Yeah. Jabari, I still have a lot of confidence. And the one thing about Jabari is we don't typically see him flat-footed. We don't see a lot of the bad habits that some of the other guys have picked up. And Sengun, I'll say the same thing about him to an extent. KJ Martin is like that as well. But that's the deal. I think you're right. It kind of comes down to the 2 guards, to be honest. I keep coming back to those guys.
Yeah, the offense is built around them, and the perimeter defense, despite what people tell you, the reason Sengun's issues are highlighted because the perimeter is so bad. Because honestly, you would need prime Dwight Howard to be back there to make our defense passable with the way the perimeter defense is. And I think that's when people see that the defense is bad, they think it's because of Sengun, but his limitations aren't able to make up for the bad defense. That's what I'm trying to say. So the defense is not bad because of him, but he doesn't help. And I think that's why you would think like, okay, put somebody back there. If you do that, you're just conceding that my guards are just bad at defense. And that's what we're going to be. And you can't win like that. There's been teams that like on a lot of those Dwight Howard teams that he's played on, whether in Orlando, that where they have guards that aren't that good and they just let him do everything. Yeah, you're going to win all these awards and all that. But at the end of the day, if you have a porous perimeter defense, teams are going to kill you in the playoffs. And don't let them spread you out and get, nowadays people are playing spread. You're going to have to be tight on your perimeter. And the KPJ, he's better than Jalen defensively. A lot of his help side defense is really, really good. The on-ball defense is terrible. He gets beat a lot. He gives up a lot of penetration. Jalen is just kind of small. A lot of people just bully him into the paint. And he really just doesn't have the strength right now to do anything with that. The positives he does do on defense, he does fight over screens really, really hard. That's a good thing for him. He's probably one of our better trying to get around screens in that. I've seen some people who are giving Jabari crap for his screen navigation. Jabari is a big man. Like, that's not a skill set. Like, they were saying, why wasn't he staying? Like, he's a big. The fact that he's checking Luka Doncic and Spencer Dinwiddie in a game should be amazing enough. Like, he's not going to be able to fight around screens. The dude is going to be a center probably and a part-time center when he's in his prime. So, yeah, I mean, I think he'll be fine. I think Jabari will be fine. Honestly, he's my, if they don't do anything right, just make sure they take care of him, because I think with a player like that, you have something. At baseline, he's going to be at least a defensive stalwart on a good team. So, you just hope that it's not just on the guards. I don't want KPJ and Jalen to decide everything on this team and decide whether we're going to be good or not, because they're just not ready yet.
Yeah, one thing on the guard defense, you talk about Sengun and his foul trouble, and it just kind of gets back to the guards, because he's got some issues, with guys coming at him full speed, but they're not coming at him full speed as much if your guards are doing their job.
Yeah, it's the back and it's like the chicken and the egg thing. Is a lot of people have philosophies on defense. Should the back end be like everything? I think having a good big man that can protect the paint gives you a baseline of like competent defense, but ultimately to do anything significant, the perimeter has to be good. You would like to have both, but on this bad team, I could see the argument for bringing in a rim protector to help them out. But to me, that just masks a bigger issue that you have. And if you ever want to be a competitive team, you can't have bad perimeter defense. I can't think of any good teams that have bad perimeter defense. Even the Rockets with, quote unquote, lazy James Harden, they had an elite when they were at their best. That 17-18 team, it was wings that could stop at the point of attack all across the board. You look at the Warriors when they're in their prime, it was, Clay and Steph with the only weak link. You had Draymond out there. You had Harrison Barnes, whether it was KD. All these teams, they have good perimeter defense. And the Lakers, when they won in the bubble, their defense was elite across the board. You can't get away from it, and you can't skip steps in this. So Jalen, Kevin Porter, they have to get really, really good at that part of their game, or we're just going to be, I hate to say this, but we're just going to be Steve Francis and Cuttino Mobley again. And I've argued against that in the past, but man, it's sure starting to look like that.
Yeah, I've brought up those names as well, because I had a front row seat, and that's what I've seen a lot with these two guys. Frank, I can't let you go without mentioning Donovan Mitchell had 71 points, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds. And just so everybody knows out there, Frank's Twitter sprays, they came at me hard when I suggested the Rockets make a play for him over the offseason. His numbers this year, 29 points per game on 49% shooting and 41% from three. The Cavs are now a 3 seed out east, or tied for the 3rd seed. Frank, when you got a chance, as I said before, to get a 25-year-old all-star for a bunch of what-if Brooklyn picks, you do it.
Yeah, I'll let you. You can have your victory parade, but I don't know. My the Donovan thing, it is strange because I think, I've heard the case for him. If you look at his playoff numbers there, I mean, he's probably on pace to have one of the best playoff like stats in maybe in NBA history. I mean,
Yep.
since he was a rookie, he's averaging like 25 a game and like 5 and 5 on good efficiency, and he's constant in that. I think that I guess it was one of those things where you get it was actually the Utah Jazz were just just not a good fit for him, and he made up a lot of some of the things that they lacked. And now that he's on a team with more complementary pieces, more dynamic players, more dynamic bigs, off guard and Garland that could create a zone, he's not having to do everything. Really gets a lot of freedom. And if you think about it, on that Jazz team, he was the sole creator, and a lot of those guys couldn't really do anything. So he must have really worked hard to get what he was getting. Now with the freedom he gets in this offense, where he has multiple guys that can create their own shot, yeah, you're seeing it. And the dude's built like an NFL running back. He's explosive. His shooting is, I mean, it's took a big leap this year in his efficiency. And yeah, the sky, even the defense that he was getting ragged on for what he showed is really improved. Yeah, it's just a good fit, good trade for them. A bad trade for who was it that for Utah, right? What did they give up a bunch of stuff for him? That
Well,
looks
I mean, the one thing the Rockets might not have had is, Lauri Markkanen's looking like an all-star. But if Utah thought that
true,
Lauri Markkanen was going to turn into an all-star, then I've got some, oceanfront property in Arizona,
right?
so to speak, to sell you, because I don't think they could have guessed that. And the Rockets had some better young guys as far as potential and first rounders that you could put into that deal than the Cavs really had, as far as, you go, okay, well, these guys might be a part of our future along with the draft choices. And before I hear the chorus of, but what about Wemby, people, I got a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, you didn't have to give up this year's first round pick because
Right.
Cleveland didn't give up an asset like that. They didn't give up a shot at Wemby. Those picks are in the future. Number two, your best odds this year for Wemby are 14%. You might as well cut that down to 7%. You heard me right. You might as well cut it down to 7% because I'd say there's at least a 50-50 chance that a 7'3" player craps out because of injuries. And I've got 5 decades of watching the NBA to know that's a fact. And, you want to look at the Rockets organization alone, it's Yao Ming, his career cut short because of injuries, or Ralph Sampson. We've seen it before. But this whole idea of like, oh, you get him and oh, you lose a shot at, yeah, you might have got into a play-in game with Donovan Mitchell this year, but even forget that. Even if you didn't get to the play-in, now you still got at least a percentage shot. You're not going to get oh my God, a 14% shot. Oh, there's a good 86% shot that you're not getting Wemby. That's what we're all excited about this year. We got an 86% chance that we don't get him. So let's just, I got to put that all to the side because this Wemby stuff is just it's out of control. And you've talked
Yeah.
about it, Frank. I mean, it's myth that you're going to get the first pick in the draft because you're terrible. We've been the worst team in the NBA the last 2 seasons, and we picked second and third. And I know Scoot's all right, but it's not like Wemby. It's not. Wemby comes in and that guy can be one of the top 10 players in the NBA. Scoot, it's a hard deal. It's a hard deal to be a top 10 player when you're 6'2".
Yeah, I think the Wemby thing is almost irrational at this point. I mean, as we watched when we lost to Orlando, they could get Wemby. Just chugging along, doing what they're doing, they could get Wemby and add Wemby to Paolo. The team that maybe the Pacers, they could get Wemby. Spurs could get Wemby. So every team thinks they're going to get Wemby. And to me, my motto is, you plan your future like you're not getting a good draft pick. That's what a prudent GM would do. Banking everything on the possibility of drafting a player that may or may not be good in the NBA is just foolishness. Obviously, you put yourself in positions to do so, but at the same time, like you said with the Donovan thing, I mean, if Donovan Mitchell comes here, then hey, guess what? You have a piece. Now you try to there are alternate routes to getting to where you want to go in the rebuild, and um, I just think that the whole tank for Wemby thing is just to me is just dumb at this point because every fan base is saying that. So I don't know why people are just thinking that somehow it's just going to be us, despite the fact that the second and third worst teams have in some cases in the past since they changed the lottery odds, have won more first number one picks than the worst first worst team. So um, the Donovan thing, for the Jazz, I mean, to me, it was kind of a dumb trade in the sense that they took back all those picks. The Cleveland looks like they're going to be a contender for the next half decade. And, I don't think any of those picks are going to convert to anything significant because even if Donovan gets hurt, Darius Garland is an all-star player. Evan Mobley's on the rise. I still have a lot of faith in him. I think he'll be a good player when it's all said and done. And, they have the guy that's supposed to be a Rocket, Jared Allen, right now, who we've been trying to make up for. And we're still going to still be trying to cover up that mistake Rafael Stone made by not keeping him. But yeah, I think they're set. That's a good team. We can take some notes and write it down on how you can kind of team build from a team that went from having LeBron James to where they are. And I think it was about 3 years they took the pivot. So yeah, good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, the thing I got a lot when I brought it up on your spaces was, well, Donovan's defense. Man, I talked about this last year. Look in the mirror. Jalen Green's defense is a way bigger issue because look, Donovan Mitchell is 6'1", but he's built like a linebacker and he's got a 6'10" wingspan. Jalen Green doesn't have anything physically that tells you he can turn it. He's built like a ballet dancer, not a linebacker, and that's an issue going forward for his potential defensively. Now, like what we talked about before is not acceptable, what he's doing, Frank, but the potential of him defensively, it's just not good when you look at his body. It's not there.
Yeah, he's gonna have to fill out. I think there's hope. I feel like he's gonna get muscle on. What I'm not even concerned about his body is just the mentality. Like one thing I love about Jabari is that you can tell he doesn't like to lose. And he still cares. Not saying Jay, Kevin, I know they all care, but they're a little too casual with some of these losses for me. Like the most disappointing thing I've heard Jalen say was when he echoed Coach Silas's remark of we're a young team and we're rebuilding after a loss. I forgot which game it was that they lost. I never want to hear a player say that. Like that's not your line to say. The coach can say that, the GM can say that. You should be pissed off after every single loss. For him to have that mentality, like there's time, we have time. To me, that's almost loser talk. But as me, being a former football player, like like no matter who the opponent, you think you think you can beat everybody, and when you don't, you get mad at yourself. So, just stuff like that, I don't know if it's just the culture they have, but it definitely is. I am a little worried, like I said. I think it's still fixable. Hopefully, they can shake some things up this offseason, bring in some vets that are going to push him and challenge him in the right way. His vet shouldn't be KJ Martin. KJ Martin should not be the voice of reason on a team. As good as, and I respect him, and he's too young. After the EG comment, he's the one that came out to the media and said that, we just have to be patient. It's a rebuild. I mean, the dude's 21. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, son, go sit down. Like there should be other vets on this team that's guiding these guys and even helping KJ with his development. It's really just a poor job right now. And it's not just Silas. Stone has to get some of that because he put together this roster and he thought this was good. And this is what I'm going to use to compete against the other teams like Orlando. And you look at their team, you look at Indiana, you look at, the Spurs with the less talent, they're doing more. Their guys are actually developing. They're not going through crazy stretches of shooting 23% in a month from three and 30% from the field. So, we have our work cut out. I think they can still make strides over this next half of the season coming up. I think that it starts with the trade deadline. I think they need to move Eric Gordon out immediately. And at least that'll free up the spot for the guys that you've been clamoring for with Tari and them getting more playing time in the offense, seeing what Tari and Jabari look like as a duo, because I'm really intrigued by that as well. There's just so much they could do that I don't know what they're doing that's just holding it up. Just more of the same.
And the Eric Gordon market's really drying up because the Lakers are falling like a lead balloon. That's one of the teams. The Suns are in the middle of an ownership change. Brian Windhorst wrote that is holding up some of the deals that they might make. It's not helping that maybe they see their window is not that open this year with Chris Paul sort of disappearing and becoming old finally. But real important stuff when you're looking at that Eric Gordon market, and that's why they shouldn't have taken their time with it. But anyway, we've banged that drum before. If any of our audience or Frank's audience that listens to me regularly was on vacation in the last couple of weeks and missed it, you're going to want to watch my conversation with the Ringers, Miran Fader. I asked her about the features that she's written in the last few years on Jalen, Jabari, and Jayshawn. She's written on all of them, 3 separate features. So we start off talking about the feature she wrote on Bryce Young. If you're not a Texans fan, just skip to the 16-minute mark. That's when we start talking about the Rockets. And at the end of this video, I'm going to put up a link to that interview so you'll see it on the screen. Frank, what's the latest on the Rockets Chop Shop?
Just real quick, that interview was great. Great questioning about great interview on your end as an interviewer. And yeah, great insightful stuff. You guys should watch that. Like, I'm shocked that a lot of Rocket fans aren't going to go watch that video. And even the Texans fans, great insight on Bryce Young. I really, really enjoyed it. Chop Shop, my latest video I looked at was the Alperen Sengun video, whether we should use him more. Obviously, the answer is yes. Check out that video. Really dig into a lot of the stats of when he is utilized. And it shows, like I said, when Sengun is playing, Jalen plays better. And when Jalen plays better, we win more games. It's a direct correlation there. So check that out. Check out our live streams after every game almost. Come to the Chop Shop channel. You can join one of my co-hosts, Space Ghost, on the post-game live streams where you can interact with other Rockets fans and kind of just express yourself after these games. We do a lot of therapy sessions nowadays more than usual. So, and also me on Twitter on the post-game spaces, not doing them as much this year, really not much to talk about. It's kind of more of the same, but yeah, I'll do those once in a blue moon. So definitely check those out on my Twitter account.
Yeah, it's real depressing, Frank, because it feels like it's just like Groundhog Day with the Rockets. It's like, man, we keep talking about the same things because they keep screwing up the same stuff every single game.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's crazy. It's bad for content creators. But better days ahead. We'll hopefully one day we'll be a contender again and be talking about how great our team is.
All right, man. Thanks a lot again for coming on. We'll talk again next week.
I appreciate you, brother.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.